belong on his network. You as a provider can't be as certain because you're trying to put together a cookie cutter sort of solution that works for everyone. So you need to make sure that you're as close to 0% false positive as possible if you're going to be taking action on these things. What stays the same? An inline IPS owned and controlled by the client. There's no reason why you shouldn't give them that. Firewall, again, owned and controlled by the client, and in most cases these are virtualized firewalls for the cloud providers. Vulnerability assessment, we leave that in. All this stuff is well understood technology, and it allows clients baseline control over their own networks within the cloud. A lot of clients aren't going to use this stuff. A lot of clients of cloud are using cloud specifically because they don't want to have to run their own IT infrastructure, and their level of expertise is a little bit lower than what yours or other security practitioners might be. So they may not use the technologies at all, but at least you're providing them. All right, so what do we add to the infrastructure? How do we make this system, how do we start building the system that will protect our clients and us from potential damage? This seems pretty straightforward to me. Doing net flow inside your environment. Understanding what traffic is there, what traffic should be there, and kind of getting a baseline for what things are supposed to look like. We should be adding an enterprise-wide IDS. Now, this particular IDS should be completely out of the visibility and control of the clients because, again, they're in an unknown state. You don't want clients being able to see, you know, I am watching you and going to take action if you keep misbehaving. You don't want them to see that, and you don't, because if they can see it, then they can try to evade it. They're going to try to evade it anyways, but at the very least, you're keeping that within your own eyes. Network access control. This is pretty straightforward too. It's a little different for cloud than it would be for a traditional environment, and I'll get to that in a minute. You're going to throw in an event correlator, and this is what's traditionally known as a SIM. For my use here, we're talking about a forensics analysis SIM rather than a regulatory SIM, as most people are familiar with it. Log consolidation and on-access misconfiguration detection. That phrase just means watching the network for new servers and services and checking them for very basic misconfigurations. All right, so when I talk about some of these things, a lot of people ask me, why not use OSSIM? And OSSIM, I've thrown the URL up here in case anybody wants to investigate open source SIMs. But OSSIM uses many of the same tools I'm suggesting. And problem I have with it, and the reason why I don't personally use it, is because it makes assumptions about the network it's placed into. And that just means that the tools it's using are all prescribed. When you use OSSIM, you know you're going to use the ACID database, I guess the base database is your system for managing data, and all the tools that go along with OSSIM. Additionally, OSSIM's correlation engine is not as flexible as SEC, which is what I'll be talking about in a minute. But OSSIM does have advantages. If you're looking for something where you won't have to manage it yourself, part of the problem with building something yourself is that you've got to deal with updates and keeping track of what's vulnerable. OSSIM, of course, takes care of all that for you. So with NetFlow in particular, I like to use a tool called NFDump. NetFlow, there are a lot of analyzers out there in the open source community. And by the way, all these tools I'm going to talk about, I specifically chose open source tools for this talk because I wanted to make sure that if any of you wanted to replicate this, you could. But there's a lot of NetFlow open source projects out there. Most of them are inactive. I chose NFDump from the variety of inactive projects or semi-active projects, mostly because it's really all it does is it throws everything into a database, and it provides you a lot of command line tools for manipulating that database. They have a front end for it called NFSend that I don't personally use, but it's convenient for scripting. So NetFlow, as we know, is used to monitor flows into and out of the network. We can use it to monitor for excessive prolonged network utilization. It can also be used to trend network performance and flag suspicious spikes. Data for descent from internal switches and other network devices for analysis. Again, you're not relying on customer environment, so you're not relying on their virtual firewall. You're relying on all your infrastructure devices to give you this data. And it can help provide network server and service inventory data for keeping track of what's running inside the client networks and your network. I like Snort for enterprise-wide IDS. URL for those of you who haven't looked at it before, but I'm sure most of you have probably seen this. It's well known and widely used. It's independent of the clients. They cannot see it. It's attached to the network egress and ingress points. There are no trusted networks. Snort, you've got that home net variable. We're not setting that to anything. We're looking for everything. Everything is untrusted in our design. And this will also provide you some network server and service inventory data. Packet Fence is the knack I've chosen to use. And Packet Fence has a a talk going on tomorrow in case any of you want more information than what I'm going to give you here. There's the URL. Now, NAC breaks down into two different types of technologies. There's pre-admission and post-admission. Pre-admission is probably what most of you who are running corporate networks are familiar with. Pre-admission NACs, they look for when a host comes onto the network to make sure there's things like patch levels, updated antivirus, all the configuration controls that you're expecting to be on the server or host, and allow the server to come into the network based off of those things being in line with what you're expecting. The post-admission devices, on the other hand, what they're doing is they're looking for behavior once the host is on the network. Ideally, you're doing both for corporate environments. It's much more difficult to do pre-admission in a cloud environment because, the clients really could be anything. The client is buying space from you. So we're using this for post-admission behavior quarantining. It's going to take input from other systems and use it to make decisions to quarantine devices. syslog-ng, which I'm pretty sure most of you have been exposed to at some point. Again, it's well known and widely used. All your infrastructure devices, your servers, switches, IDS, etc., are logging here. Again, these are not your customer devices because the customer devices they have control over and can do weird things to. And part of what you're trying to protect yourself and your clients from are these client environments. Okay, the on-access misconfiguration detection. So I use a variety of tools for this. I use Medusa for the basic brute forcing, and I have a list of like 10 usernames and 13 passwords I use. Should run a scan within about 30 seconds. Metasploit for some more advanced things. And then Nmap. I use Nmap primarily to look for our customers who have bought firewalls from us, but aren't using them. It's my way of saying, hey, you set, and this has happened. Customers come into our environment and set allow all while they're testing something and just leave it that way. I'm sure you all know that that's a nightmare. The clients may not. So the Nmap is used to detect that and warn them, hey, your firewall's turned off right now. I have a few others for odds and ends. They're specialized things like looking for open proxies, stuff like that. But these are the ones that are the workhorses of this particular system. These tools are called by the correlation system to run basic misconfiguration checks of any new servers and services seen on the network. And that comes from the NetFlow data as well as the Snort data. Finally, we have where the magic occurs, which is the correlation system. Now, my correlation system of choice is the simple event correlator. It's a pretty simple, non-vendor specific correlation system. It'll keep track of events from a variety of sources. It's not in line. So this is a big difference from the inline IPS. We're not in line here. So I can make slow, well-informed decisions. I can keep all kinds of things in memory as long as I have enough memory to hold it. And I can spend minutes making decisions instead of having to spend split seconds. The SEC system is in charge of coordinating everything else in the environment. All right, so how does this work? We've got here our rather geeky-looking correlator, our cloud with our client environment, and our outgoing ISP link. This symbol in this spot right here is just, this is where our NetFlow data is coming from. I'm using it to generically represent our switches and various network devices. Our firewall, and down below we have the AAA server. On the outside, we have the enterprise-wide IDS, again running independent of the client. From time to time, our correlator will fire off our on-access misconfiguration detection as well as our vulnerability assessment. This is used to keep track of what's going on with the client systems to give us an idea of where there might be security problems. So let's say we have a customer start sending out an event. Right? These are any kind of malware, could be worm propagation, could be a scam. All these devices would be configured to send logs back to a central location, our correlator in this case. Additionally, the two network style devices, the switches, the net flow, and our firewalls would send our net flow data back to the correlator. Hopefully this should allow our correlator to understand that there's a threat going on, fire off the NAC, which will then turn off the server and the malware. But how does that occur? I'm going to go through a few scenarios real quick on easy ways that this can be done. Towards the end of the talk, I'll talk about some more complex ways to detect misbehaving hosts. But here we have our IDS, our firewall, and our switches. And these are our happy clients. We'll throw in a bad guy. So someone buys a server from us, and they turn it on, and they start doing bad stuff. Now, this particular scenario, our bad guy has started using a known hacking tool to start attacking outside the environment. And this is actually a really simple way to detect them. The one I see most frequently with this is SIP scanners. So the external IDS should understand that there are some signatures related to specific tools that are known to be bad. Detects that, notifies the correlator. Correlator says, hey, I've got malware in here. Shuts down. But there are other scenarios. In this case, maybe we have a pattern of traffic going outbound. A series of packets that all together, or individually I should say, don't mean anything, but all together represent some sort of larger pattern. In this case, let's say we've got an ARP storm going on the inside. We could capture that with NetFlow. The NetFlow would tell the correlator something weird was going on. The correlator would have to make its own decision about that NetFlow data. And again, shut the host off. Now, a quick note about NFDump, and this is common with all NetFlow data. Unusual traffic patterns alone don't dictate an incident. What needs to be done is NFDump data has to be compared with IDS, firewall, and other data to look for anomalies. An example of this would be a traffic peak combined with the ARP collision messages coming from your switches could be indicative of an ARP cache overflow. And I should probably say that it's highly indicative of an ARP cache overflow. A traffic peak combined with many IRC events, probably some sort of botnet participation. As for the correlated IDS logs, there's a lot more information there, but it's limited to what we can see. A single event type, if it entered a server and then it was replayed by that server outbound several times, might be a worm. It might be email, but it might be a worm. If a server contacts successive servers using the same administrator protocol, so it's scanning outbound for like SSH, protocol scanning. I just threw this one up pretty quickly earlier today to give you guys an idea of the types of correlation. These are the most common ones I catch on my network. The red ones are the ones I've marked as being close to 100% of chance of bad stuff going on. The rest are things where I would send out an alert and have an administrator come and take a closer look. The first one's a sweep. So a sweep is just where an event is played from a host across multiple other hosts. Pretty straightforward. It's usually indicative of inventorying a network, sometimes protocol scanning, a variety of things. A scan is where one host contacts one host and just plays a bunch of different types of events. That's like Nessus, NIC2, those types of tools. A storm is one loud, noisy host generating a lot of traffic. That may or may not be something bad. Sometimes it's just someone sending out a bunch of email. Could be any number of things. Baseline delta is a much more complex correlation. What your correlator should be doing is keeping track of what's normal for your network. That's both for the types of events that occur on your network, how clients normally perform on your network, and what the network traffic looks like from the NetFlow data. Baseline delta, that is just a general name for anything that deviates significantly from that. Say 150 to 200% spike in traffic, new snort event types you've never seen before, things like that.